everybody. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Chris Dowd. I'm here in Mexico as a Fulbright scholar and working with Dalus Capital. So we are an early stage VC fund that invests across a variety of verticals, and one of which is climate innovation. So I want to tell you just really quickly sort of our philosophy around climate innovation and you know why might a VC fund be helping to coordinate this sort of event. The reality is that this is a team effort, and as Ambassador Salazar mentioned, now more than ever, we need to have every stakeholder present and aware of the skill sets and abilities of one another. So for that reason, we've assembled this first panel here to really set the tone for the next 2 days. And we call it Creative Coalition. So if we could jump to there's Creative Coalition. The idea here is we have representatives from the NGO sector, from the diplomatic sector, from the academic sector, from the research sector, from small government, from multinational governments. And each of the people that you're going to hear from today on this panel has a very unique perspective on how we can advance a green transition. So with that, I would like to thank all of our panelists for coming. And I'd just like to start by having everyone introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what you're working on and maybe what the next year looks like for you in terms of priorities. And then we'll jump into a few questions, and at the end we'll have a few minutes for Q&A.
Hi, hello, I'm Arnoldo Matus. I'm the Executive Director of Ithaca Environmental. Ithaca Environmental is a consulting firm working on climate change since the last 10 years, based here in Mexico City. And we have developed over 100 projects in the last 10 years. We work currently in more than 6 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. And well, some of the initiatives that we are currently developing is, I'm currently the liaison officer for Low Carbon Business Action and Circular Economy. It's a project financed by the European Commission, and it's supporting the private sector to engage and look for opportunities between the private sector in Europe and Mexico in order to push for the transformation much needed on the green economy and the transition for a low carbon based economy. That's one of my key projects, but as well, we are working with the federal government and in particular with CONAGUA, and there we are working with the German Development Bank, and we are pushing for a policy-based loan on adaptation to climate change for the water sector or water cycle, much needed in Mexico, because as you know, we are very vulnerable to climate change in terms of our water resources. So I would stop with that. I have more than 20 years experience on the climate change agenda, and I hope I can contribute in this panel. Thank you. Perfect.
Is that right? Okay. Hi. Thank you, Chris, for inviting me, for making me fly from Brazil to here. I live in the south of Brazil, in an island called Florianópolis. It's a very beautiful island. And it's such a pleasure to be here. I lead the work of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation in Latin America. For those who don't know the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, it's a foundation with a mission to accelerate the transition to a circular economy. And it is basically the organization that, when launched in 2010, put the topic of a circular economy out there. And the reason why Chris invited me to be here is because there's a strong link between circular economy and climate. Although the current discussion is mainly dominated by the energy transition, which is absolutely important. Calculations and a report that we launched in 2019 show that if we are very successful in all the energy transition, moving to renewable energies, and by being the most energy efficiency possible, we will only tackle 55% of the emissions. The remaining 45% of the emissions come from the way we produce and consume food and products in our society, which is basically based on a linear model, which is absolutely based on extraction, transformation, and waste. And this is why I think and I believe that talking about the energy transition combined with the transformation to a circular economy is the way forward for us to build a low carbon economy. And that's my mission in Latin America. The foundation works globally with a focus on North America, Latin America, Europe, and China. When we call Latin America, I know that Mexico is a bit of here and there. Mexico is part of what we call Latin America, which is, so my mandate is basically to work from Mexico down to Patagonia with governments, businesses, both the incumbent largest corporations as well as the innovators. And we also work with communicating, with making the topic of a circular economy known. And my whole mission is really to advance and make sure that more practices, services, products are put in the market based on the concept and the principles of a circular economy. We will talk about that in a bit, but it's way beyond recycling. So let's just not confuse that. And Chris will make me talk a little bit about that. It's talking about a regenerative economy by design. And so looking at the forest and the assets of the Amazon, which is, most of it is in my country. So I do have, my heart is in there, especially for the recent happenings in the forest. So basically what we're focusing now is really to help through the Latin American Caribbean Coalition to foster policy at a national level, but also at subnational level, mostly focused on the regional collaboration among countries, which is absolutely crucial. Also working with a community and creating and massively expanding the community of innovators and incumbent businesses in the region, headquartered in Latin America, to be part of our global network, where we create lots of opportunities for creating knowledge about the circular economy, cross-pollination, collaboration, and really putting the circular economy in practice and at scale. And we are always creating means for communicating and expanding the knowledge of the circular economy in the broader audience, and working with the media and with content generation as well. So that's basically my focus, and we're going to keep working on that, focusing a lot on the government part as well as the business part for the next year, and that's what excites me a lot. So really, really pleased to be here and meet all of you and potentially collaborate in a very close future. Thank you.
Thank you, Luisa. Hi, I'm Ana González from the British Embassy in Mexico City. I am a strategy lead for the International Climate Finance, which basically means that I oversee a lot of the programs that the UK government has in Mexico, programs specific to climate change. We have a big portfolio of programs that go from energy, public policy, waste, cities and mobility, and just cross sections of climate change. And all of these different programs tackle the same issues to reduce emissions. The UK has a big commitment towards climate change. As Ambassador Ken Salazar mentioned, climate change knows no borders. So we operate under the same idea that it is a global issue, so we have to tackle it globally. The UK hosted COP26 in Glasgow last year and holds the presidency until November this year, when Egypt will take over COP27. But the UK's commitment towards climate change moves forward regardless of the presidency of COP26, with local commitments and international commitments. And that's where diplomacy here in Mexico comes in. We work with a lot of programs. I'm happy to be sitting next to Andres from WRI, who we work with closely. IDOM is another of our partners. TEC de Monterrey is another of our partners. So we work in partnerships within our programs and within our policy sector, so that we can work together towards the same goals. I oversee programs that are both bilateral and multilateral, so we are very happy to be partnering with other countries, like the US, for example, in forestry programs. or in any sector of programs. And basically, we all want the same goals. We just have to put our heads together. So what does the next year look like? It looks like keep on working. Climate change is a lot of work, a lot of convening common goals together and actually implementing the climate actions that we already know that have to happen. So thanks.
Well, good morning. My name is Andres Flores. I come from the World Resources Institute, WRI, from the Mexico office, where I'm the Director of Climate and Energy. WRI is a global think tank. We are focused on environment and development as well. This year we're marking 40 years already of existing in the US primarily, but then we expanded and we have already projects in more than 50 countries and offices in 8 countries globally. Mexico is one of those. We also have an office in Brazil, and recently we opened an office in Colombia as well, in which we're working on several agendas, but also on the Amazon preservation, not a minor thing. We're working on many things. Currently, one that I would mention, because I think this audience may be interested in that topic, is on helping companies, corporations, establish science-based targets. Those are climate targets that are aligned to 1.5 degrees of global warming. And we have already 2,600 companies globally that have some sort of SBT, we call it a Commission Science-Based Target Commitment, but only 19 Mexican companies among those 2,600. So there's a huge opportunity there. And the markets are going that way. So whether we want it or not, companies all over the world will have to commit to some sort of mitigation target that is that ambitious, that takes us in a trajectory towards 1.5 global warming target. We have companies such as Cemex in Mexico, so it's not even though we have only 19, some of those are large companies. Cemex is one of them. Orbia, for instance, in the petrochemical sector, is another one. Cemento Chihuahua. We have several companies in different sectors, including heavy industry. And some of those 2,600 companies have what we call Scope 3 commitments, which mean that their whole value chain will have also to commit and to achieve very ambitious targets. So I suppose many of the companies you are working on or will start working on in the sectors that you are proposing projects will have in some way to establish these sorts of targets and really move fast. And it's not only because of climate, of the global challenge that we have, that companies are doing this. Many are doing it because it implies that they are going to become more competitive, that they will attend to the needs of their markets. We know that consumers, especially the younger ones, are demanding that the products that they buy are more and more greener, low carbon, coming from companies that are socially and environmentally responsible. So there are many factors that play into this movement that we see in the corporate sector. And there's a role for companies to play. National governments will not, whatever they do, tackle climate change sufficiently because the challenge that we're facing is so huge that it needs action from all fronts. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Chris, for inviting me and for being able to be in this great panel. My name is Paola Visconti, and my role is Strategic Engagement Lead. I work for the Office of Sustainable Development and Engagement in the Vice Presidency of Inclusion, Social Impact, and Sustainability at Tecnológico de Monterrey. So it's one of the vice presidencies at the Tecnológico de Monterrey. And basically my role as engagement lead is just this, being able to meet people from different sectors and seeing ways in which we can collaborate for climate action, to mobilize climate action. Now, as many of you know, and Chris asked me to give a little bit of a background on Tec de Monterrey, maybe for some of you is is Tec de Monterrey is very common. Maybe for some of you, it's your first time here. Tec de Monterrey is a very large nationwide nonprofit private university in Mexico. We are spread out throughout the country. We have campuses in 29 cities, over 9,000 students. We have programs from high school, undergraduates, and graduate programs. So it's a very big university. We have research centers, 6 different schools, and many, many other things. So I also wanted to mention that I'm here representing not only the office where I work, but I do want to mention that there are many other people at Tecnológico de Monterrey that are working on sustainability and that have done it for many, many years. The initiative that I am representing is called Ruta Azul, which is our sustainability and climate action plan that was launched 1 year ago in April of 2021. That action plan has 6 areas of focus: culture, mitigation, adaptation, research, education, and engagement, right? So I'm not gonna go into detail into each of those focus areas, but I just wanna say that since last year, we've been working really hard to learn about what Tec de Monterrey is doing internally, but not only to learn about what we're doing to keep it inside, but it is very important for us to be able to collaborate with others so that we can accelerate climate action. So how can, as a university, we can take out, or we can share our technology, our capabilities, our knowledge, but how can we also learn from others, and how can we work together for the climate emergency, right? So I hope that I could be able to tell you a little bit more about Ruta Azul, which is the name that we've given our sustainability and action plan, and maybe we can collaborate a little bit further during these 2 days. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introductions. So have just one question for the whole panel again, and can keep the responses around a minute, and then would like to open up to more specific questions about each of your work. So we're all slowly coming out of a global pandemic, the coordination around which has been truly a wicked problem, from the local level to the federal level to the level of industrial acceleration that was needed to produce the vaccines, the degree of coordination of which humanity has never seen. I believe that has been a trial run for climate, for an extreme climate transition. I'm curious how all of you might reflect on the pandemic, and if you think there have been any lessons drawn from that global experience as well, and maybe things that we can build on as we look out into the next 5 to 10 years that will be extremely demanding for all of us individually and all of our organizations.
Thanks, Chris. All right, so from a circular economy perspective and from the foundation perspective, I think the pandemic just made it even more evident the fragilities of a linear system. And I mean that because during the pandemic, we saw lots of supply chains and shocks in food supply chain, medical equipments, medical supplies, and all those things, because logistics were impacted too. So the resilience of our economy was even more exposed, or the lack of resilience was even more exposed. So from the foundation perspective, we really see the pandemic as kind of a moment where we say, yeah, it's time to give a step forward, not a step back. Looking at some learnings, I think, as I said, I mean, from a circular economy perspective, there's this local value chains element which need to be more and more combined with the principles of a circular economy. So, for example, when we think of food supply chains, you know, the closest they are from the food consumption centers, when we look at, for example, remanufacturing, repair, reuse models, and we look at them as local value chains where you create more and more jobs, more and more inclusiveness, when you design policies so circular value chains are made to be accessible, inclusive, products are made to be accessible, services are made to be accessible and inclusive. All these policies need to be designed, and the value chains need to be designed so that we create more economic resilience and societal resilience too. And it will be much better for climate, for the environment, because you'll be transitioning to a lower carbon kind of model of the economy. And I think the last thing is really to look at the need to create a common vision. I echo with what David Livingston said in the beginning. A common vision is crucial because this transition will require unprecedented levels of collaboration. Through the Latin American Caribbean Circular Economy Coalition, we created during last year a vision for a circular economy, a shared vision for a circular economy that was built with all the countries in the region, all the governments and other stakeholders, and really the need to look at a common horizon of building a circular economy, a transition to a low carbon economy that is inclusive by nature, especially looking at our region, and regenerative by nature, that builds on our strengths, our abundant resources, rather than extracting and depleting them. I think the need to create that common vision. I think the pandemic also put us the need to create a common vision of us getting out of a crisis, of us having to build collaborative solutions to deal with something that has no borders. So that's my take on that. Who wants to go next?
Well, I think one of the most important lessons is that we have higher consciousness of that we are interconnected. So from the pandemic perspective, but also on other issues like climate change, right? So it's a global issue, will not be solved just by one particular individual or corporation or country, but by all of us, by our actions. In terms of the lessons in my experience, personal experience, and as well from my organization, was that we transit from one day to the other to a digital economy. We basically are working online, and we will never go back to what it used to be. But then we very quickly were involved in this program for hydrological program for the region of Yucatan while we were having the pandemic. And that has a big component of an inclusory process to communicate the actions and the program to, for example, marginal communities and indigenous communities. And we will not able to go to the sites and do our normal job. So we rapid transit into how we could put the best technology, but as well really go and communicate to these communities that may not have Wi-Fi in their community. So we did a mix of a methodology, which was very successful, and I think was the first regional program in Mexico that was approved in this administration, and as well we included the climate change component. So I think for us that was part of innovation that we created by having interdisciplinary teams with, I am one of the oldest, so with younger people bringing new solutions. And currently we are working with Banobras, which is the largest development bank in Mexico, and we are helping them to create new criteria for the recovery plan for the pandemic, which includes attending climate change. So they will have new indicators into their matrix to decide and prioritize projects based as well on climate change indicators about emissions, but as well on creating resilience, in addition to all other components and dimensions, social dimensions of creating good jobs and raising the economy, accelerating the economic recovery. But I think there is an opportunity. I think that the financial sector is much more aware of this interconnectedness, and it's more willing to explore climate solutions and work with us that we are working already on the field to accelerate the transition much needed regarding climate change.
From COVID, I think that we've learned 3 key things. One is resilience and the need for resilience and flexibility and doing things differently, not like bouncing back from the horrible things that the pandemic brought onto us. So just having the flexibility of moving from going to the office every single day to the digital world, but also the complexity of all of that. The second thing is the need for science-based solutions and evidence-based solutions. And I think that there is a key link to this. The COVID vaccine was developed in a record time. No vaccine was developed as quickly as a COVID vaccine. And we have now enough evidence that it saves lives. It's the reason why most of us are here today. Because we've been able to tackle a whole pandemic. Then why isn't that applied to climate? We have enough science to tell us what we need to do. We know what the climate actions are. We have to implement them. So we need to keep moving based upon science and evidence-based actions. And the third one is the humanity of it. I mean, I do appreciate that we can, host global conferences online. But for example, for COP26, it was really important to get all those people to Glasgow because we hadn't seen each other in ages. And just the privilege of being here face to face, having face to face events. I mean, I think that we have to find a balance between the digital world and the connections that we can have through screens, but also the humanity of it and bring back the face-to-face contact. Having a lot of panels and conferences online and then being able to be in the same room with people and reading their facial expressions and engaging with people, I think that is a key element to moving towards what we want, the same goals. And there is a balance. I think that we can't overdo it. We cannot move back to where we were, but we have to find a balance because at the end, the humanity of it all is what helps us move forward. So those three things would be my lessons learned from COVID-19 and from working, seeing how the world is working towards climate.
I totally agree with what Anna just mentioned. I was going to say the same thing, that I think even though we learned how to have conversations online, and it was a way for us to connect with others that we might not have connected otherwise if we hadn't had Zoom and Teams and this opportunity to have conferences with people all over the world at the same time. I think the humanity aspect of it, of being able to see each other again, is very important. And I also wanted to mention that the pandemic is still being very hard on a lot of people, on a lot of communities and societies, and on some countries more than others. But we also didn't forget that there's also a climate crisis, right? The climate emergency didn't stop because there was a pandemic, right? So I think that it's very important to learn of both things as something that are happening at the same time and are correlated as well, right? So our sustainability and climate action plan was actually released during the pandemic, right? Because we did realize that it was something that we needed to tackle, and we just couldn't wait to put our plan forward, to have a plan for action, right? So now, hopefully, we'll be able to make more progress as the pandemic lets us obviously have more in-person connections to get back to work, to normal. I don't know if that we can say that anymore, but definitely being able to have this presence is also very, very important for us to be able to make these connections and to work together on both things, right? On making sure that we are better prepared, right? And that we can collaborate more in person to make more tangible progress on the climate emergency.
I would go back to one thing that was mentioned this morning already about how crises can be opportunities. I think we saw that with the COVID and the economic crisis that ensued, how many countries took advantage of that situation, which was terrible by itself, to put in place recovery packages. in which there was a lot of emphasis on them being green. For instance, removing subsidies, putting in place new subsidy schemes for clean technology, for instance, for innovation, for transformation of economy, or simply by providing support to companies with the condition that that support was aligned with greening the operation of those companies. So that's a learning lesson, I think, for the climate crisis. The climate crisis is going to be much bigger by many magnitudes of the COVID crisis. But there's also an opportunity. Of course, we are concerned about the impacts. We are concerned about the emergency, but we can also see the big opportunity around the transformation that the economy will have to go through in order to solve this crisis. We have estimated at WRI that we have a $26 trillion opportunity by 2030 only, and also that's a business opportunity, an economic opportunity, but also one that would take us in a path in which we would save lives. The estimation is that 700,000 lives would be saved globally if we go in that path that is consistent in terms of mitigation of emissions with a 1.5 degrees global warming from now on until 2030. And also we would create jobs, and we would create development, the type of development that a country like Mexico wants. By the way, Mexico did not put in place any recovery package of any significance. And what Mexico committed to in order to go out of the crisis is more of the same. Invest in a refinery, for instance, invest in the types of technologies and infrastructure that should be really not being part of the equation anymore.
Thank you so much. So we'll jump into a few specific questions from each of the panelists. The Rockefeller Foundation runs a program called 100 Resilient Cities. The purpose of this program is to put experts inside of city government of the 100 cities that are facing the most pressing climate, sustainability, resilience issues of the day, whether that's a day zero water crisis or overpopulation or whatever it might be. And these experts are positioned at the head of the table with the mayors, with the leaders of those city governments to try to accelerate and initiate change. We're in Mexico City. We're also fortunate enough to have the first Chief Resilience Officer of Mexico City here on the panel with us today, Arnoldo. Would love to just ask you, Arnoldo, if you could share a little bit about what those years were like working in city government, maybe some lessons you have to share with the group, and maybe how you think cities can be vehicles for change against climate.
Thank you, Chris. Well, it was a great opportunity to collaborate with so many different organizations in the city, but as well internationally. I mean, one of the key issues of being in 100 resilient cities was that the interconnectedness with the other cities, right? With solutions from the other cities, with the other chief resilience officers and exchange experiences between us. But as well, I have to say that this city in particular has so many risks from the one side. I mean, we have everything apart from tsunamis. Sometimes in Xochimilco, they say they have with some earthquakes tsunamis, but not really. But all the rest we do have. And some of them are interconnected as well, like let's say the overexploitation of the aquifer create higher vulnerability for our infrastructure for the next earthquake, right? So these are things that are linked. And this was an opportunity to collaborate with large NGOs, with universities, with Tech of Monterrey, UNAM, with different think tanks in the city, as well with the government, to think about the risk of the future. The next 50 years, what were the main challenges? And for sure, one of the main challenges was related to climate change, and in particular, our bad relation with water, right? The overexploitation of our local aquifer, which supplies 50% of our water supply, and that probably is going to be gone in the next 30 years. when we may face a potential drought, right? Like it's happening today in Monterrey. So that's a potential scenario, not just for this city, but for central and basically for many parts of the country. So we had the opportunity to work and collaborate with different parts of the society, which was very enriching. We were successful in bringing 100 resilient cities, the hub for Latin America and the Caribbean, here in the city, because we were a hub already in terms of risk and capacities, and we had something to share with the rest of the region. My experience with the government, well, it's difficult to work sometimes with the government. My main criticism to the government is their short-term planning perspective. Even in this city with so many problems, we do not have like more than a planning of 6 years. Well, we have a new institution like the new Institute of Planning and Long Perspective. Still, it's building its initial steps, but that potentially will bring us an opportunity to think in a 20, 40 years period. But I would say it's very weak, our institutions at many levels in terms of long-term perspective. And issues like the one I was telling you, that we are overexploiting our aquifer. We will probably not have our aquifer in the next 30 years, and we may face scenarios of droughts. It's unbelievable the need to work on those scenarios and to invest. And I don't see that happening yet at the level of effort needed. And that's the same in terms of the transition much needed into a low carbon economy, circular economy, where we transform how we move ourselves. We cannot depend on the car anymore, even if everything goes electric, because the traffic will still be there. So in order to improve our cities, we need to move to other modes of transformation, and that needs also a lot of planning and long-term perspective. And yeah, I think that's one of the issues. You have to work with the governments because they are a critical actor, but we need to help as a society, we need to help them to have a longer term perspective on how we prioritize, how we take decisions. Thank you, Chris.
Awesome, thank you so much. So my next question is for Andres. I understand you come from a long prolific academic background. Now, of course, you're leading this office at the World Resource Institute. My question is, I assume this isn't just a US problem, but it is very difficult to translate frontline academic research into a language and a toolkit that's accessible for political entities, for example, governments, the international community. How does your organization think about translating frontline research into actionable policy?
Well, we like to think of ourselves as a think tank as much as a do tank. So we want really to use everything that we know and that we can help find out, and all the substantive research that we can do, try to use that so that it is really leading implementation. And the other way around as well, we want policymaking to be based on evidence. So that's what moves us. But of course, there's a difficulty there, as you were mentioning, Chris. Translating science sometimes is not that easy. We're struggling even with the climate crisis, which is something that evident that we all feel it in our everyday lives. To convey that message to people so that they can take action, whatever sphere they are, it's complex, it's complicated, and I think we need to speak to the sometimes not only the minds but also the sentiments of people, and that is something we are trying to do. Ambassador Salazar was mentioning today how water, for instance, which is the main concern in Mexico, as Arnoldo is also saying, and it should be something that we think of every single day, is so closely linked with climate. And we don't always do that click in our minds. So probably there's something there for you as innovators to work on, to try to bring solutions that solve both things at the same time, but also that help put in people's minds and actions how important it is, whatever they do, no matter how small one may seem to be in the big picture.
Awesome, thank you. Luisa, my next question is for you. I think circular economy is one of those concepts that's been evangelized for some years, but it's really broken out in the last 5 to 7 years, I would say. So I know that your team was really directly close consultants with Google in sort of revitalizing their supply chain. And we'll hear later today from Algramo, which is our Dalus portfolio company and an incredible circular economy startup. But I think of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation as being the engine behind this sort of intellectual corpus of the circular economy. So I'm curious if you could just tell us a little bit about, help us look under the hood, right? Like how did the Ellen MacArthur Foundation bring this concept forward? And I assume most in the room are familiar with it today. So how can you walk us through that journey and how you did it?
Absolutely. Well, it all started with a dream, with Ellen's dream, actually. I'm not sure if everyone knows Ellen. Ellen was a yacht woman. She was the fastest person to go solo around the world in a boat in 2005. And during those 71 to 72 days that she was in the boat, she had this epiphany, which was that everything she had was everything she had. And she needed to use the resources in a wise way, and she couldn't waste, otherwise she could die, and she wouldn't finish and cross the line, at least not alive. She couldn't take too much on a boat, otherwise the boat would be too heavy, so she wouldn't beat the record. And then, the whole realization of those 72 days alone, crossing the world, when she crossed the record line, the record and the sport itself became secondary to this epiphany. And that's what then moved her to, in the next 5 years, to go around and speak to businesses, to governments that she had influence on, to academics and leaders of schools of thoughts like the Cradle to Cradle, industrial ecology, biomimicry, and schools of thoughts that were already thinking of the problems between or the linearity of the economy versus the circularity of the world. So, and she realized that there was something about that to be transformed into the thinking to rule the next age of development in our economy. And then in 2010, she launches the foundation. And basically what we do is to promote the idea of a circular economy. So we really create reports that were responsible for really putting the topic out there, right? Even in 2012, we were invited by the World Economic Forum to be in Davos. And in Davos, the CEO festival, nobody wanted to talk about sustainability and environmental stuff and even climate. So the circular economy topic really put that topic of creating an economy that works with the planet in the center of the discussion, because the crisis is there and it's impacting the economy, it's impacting businesses, it's impacting food production, it's impacting lots of other value chains. So bringing the topic to the center of the system was one of the things that moved us, and it still moves us. We only believe in transforming the system, working with the actors of the system. So that's the second thing we do. So one, we promote the idea, and two, we engage the system. So we will work, if you go to our website, we work with the most evil corporations, and we will always work with them. Well, Google, but I'm just kidding. I'm not saying Google is evil, but we work with those. We work with those corporations. Do you want to say, okay, we're going to create a world free of plastic pollution without working with Coca-Cola? You can't say that. It's just impossible. It's naive. So we work with these folks because we only believe in transforming the system by transforming the system with the system actors. So we engage them. We also work with the innovators because they bring agility, they bring innovative thinking, they bring solutions that can then influence and scale with, by cross-pollination with the incumbent, with the big transactors, the big Titanics of the economy. So we keep working with the system, all these actors, and we work with policymakers because the circular economy won't really accelerate in the pace that we need to tackle the global crisis that we are facing of climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, if it's not scaled. So voluntary commitments from the industries are great because they send signals, but we need scale. And we need to transform the circular economy in the norm rather than the exception. So we need policies to really create the new rules of the game, because they today are very aligned to linear economy subsidies, fiscal measures, name one. Everything is really favoring a linear economy rather than a circular economy. And then the third thing we do is really to mobilize system solution. And we do that and to really move specific systems, and we're currently working with plastics, fashion, food, and finance to really move a system to a momentum where it's unstoppable and it cannot go back. So we've done a lot on those topics, and we want to see more happening in all the sectors. But I mean, just going back to, evangelizing, I like the word you use, the topic, because it really sounds like you need to stress, you need to create a narrative, you need to create a futuristic narrative to show us where to go. And I mentioned in the beginning that we work with communicating, because the topic became more famous and known, but there are lots of noises around it. I personally see myself in lots of audiences where everyone is talking about, oh yeah, I'm a company that does circular economy. No, you don't do circular economy because the economy is linear. So you probably apply some of the principles of the circular economy, which are eliminates waste and pollution by design, circulate products and materials, and regenerate nature. So those principles need to be the lenses to really create businesses, to really create products, to really create policy, so that we create a system where the circular economy is possible at scale. And I think a lot of my time is really looking at how do we bring the mindset, how do we build these lenses, the anteojos that we need to look at the economy through the lenses of these principles. And we do that a lot, but then we also work with the incumbents and the innovators to put it in practice so that people see it in practice. No one can really, kind of put it in practice without seeing the tangible things happening. That's why we keep working with the systems, the actors in the system. So I think, it's all together. It's a systemic and holistic change. And we've been successful, as you said. I mean, we've been in Latin America, and I was invited by Andrew, our CEO, whom you met in Dallas a month ago, back in 2015, to kickstart the first office of the foundation outside of Europe. So I was by myself in Brazil, starting the business, kind of really entrepreneurial, creating something with a focus in Brazil. And then me and my intern, now a super capable professional working in my team. And now the topic is out there. You have a Chilean roadmap to really transform an extractive, mining-based country into a country that values its natural resources, that create jobs that are aligned to low carbon transition. And then you have Colombia with a strategy to really move forward lots of sectors in the country for that. You have another 11 countries now working on their own circular economy roadmaps. You have lots of innovators, and I hope to meet some of you here in this room today and tomorrow. You have lots of innovators, and you mentioned Algramo, which we in the foundation, we are big fans of Algramo. Macarena! And I hope to hear more from you and to really finally meet you in person, because the pandemic hasn't really allowed us to do that, although we did meet online. So, I mean, we see a lot happening, but we really want to move it towards a scaling mechanism to create, the right mechanism so that it really scale and we really start seeing this abundant region that we live in, to create that economy that is regenerative, to get out of the curse of being a resource abundant while extracting it and exporting it. So there's a lot to do. The topic is out there, but let's keep working together so that it really reaches its potential and tackles the global crisis that we are facing now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Luisa. So we'll just do two more questions, one for Paola and one for Anna. And then we'd love to open it up for 5 or 10 minutes if anyone has a burning question or thoughts. So Paola, you're the only person on this panel, from what I understand, that engages regularly with students and has students as a critical stakeholder. So this is a two-part question. One, can you tell us about the sort of culture at Tec de Monterrey around sustainability among the students? Do you see that there's a lot of activism? Do you see that there's entrepreneurship or excitement around the idea? And then the second one being, how do you think about IP creation as a university? You know, this is one of the most incredible technical universities in the world. You have a huge footprint here in Mexico and in Latin America. Would love to know how you think about directing the brain power that is in this facility. So the first one is about, you know, the pulse on the youth of Tec de Monterrey, and the second about your vision looking ahead in research and that sort of thing.
Well, that's a great question. As a university, of course, the students are the core of what we do, right? I've been working at the Tec for about a year, specifically on our sustainability and climate action plan. And one of the things that we are going to focus on this year is involving more the student body of the Tec de Monterrey. As you know, as I mentioned, Tec de Monterrey is the big university, 29 campus all over the country. But we have to make sure that we engage the students in our sustainability and action plan. We're a university. We can't just focus on our operations or with our teachers. Students have to be at the core of what we do. So in this year, we've met a lot of students, and I think I'm going to answer your question with one example that I have, or maybe two. In March, we were asked to participate in a national it was a national planning conference for the I don't know how to do it in English. They're la FETEC, they're la Federación de Estudiantes del Tec de Monterrey, right? They're leaders of each campus. And we mentioned, or we presented the Sustainability and Climate Action Plan, and all of the students that were there were extremely happy to hear that the Tec had a plan. They hadn't heard it before, and so they were really happy to hear about the plan, to read it, and to also be able to propose things in their campus. So we want to make sure that students can come to their campus leaders or their teachers, and that they are motivated, that they're inspired, that they're encouraged to do the work that they want to do. The students obviously have a lot of ideas, they have a lot of energy, and they want to do a lot of things. So in this meeting, we had several agreements on how we're going to move forward from the national office where I am to make sure that they feel supported, that they feel heard, that they can bring their ideas forward, and that we can support them in their journey. And two examples that I have, one is from Campus León, where the students are leading sort of a certification process that the city of León is put out there. I don't remember the name right now. I think it's called Banda Ecológica or something like that. I'm sorry if it's not the right name. But the students are the ones that are going out there and researching the emissions of the buildings that how much energy consumption, the energies they study and have, the water management at their campus, the waste. So they're learning about sustainability, they're measuring sustainability in their campus, so they're leading this effort in their campus. And then there's this other students that I met. They're from Campus Puebla and I think Campus Monterrey. And they started, I think it's a startup, and it's called Oxtron, and it's a platform for the students.
I think we have the Oxtron team
really?
here, or they're
Are
coming
they
in the
here?
afternoon. In the back.
Hi.
Welcome.
So I guess they're gonna talk about it later. Maybe I shouldn't spoil what they're gonna talk about. But anyway, I met them a couple of weeks ago. They're working with the rest of our teams. They have an amazing platform that can basically just tell us how much the food that we're consuming, the emissions, right? So you can see the calories, but then you're going to be able to see the emissions, and that is not only going to affect the environment, but also our culture, right? And culture is at the center of our sustainability and climate action plan, because if we don't change our culture, our habits, and the way we think and the way we act and what we buy and how much we buy, etc., and then nothing's going to change, right? So I am very excited about all of what the students bring to the table, what they're proposing, the energy they bring, and I just hope that as a plan, as a Tec de Monterrey, that we can keep encouraging them, supporting them, and giving them the space to create these ideas.
Awesome, thank you so much. And I think we're running a little behind schedule, so won't have time for Q&A, but all of our panelists, I believe, are staying at least through lunch, so feel free to connect with them afterwards. But Anna, you have a very unique position here on the panel. Curious if you could tell us about some of the learnings from the CFA program. And this is sort of an interesting element of your program, right? Is that the IP that's generated from in the UK, correct? That you have some special program that makes that IP more accessible to startups around the world, or specifically in Mexico. We have a lot of entrepreneurs here in the room. I think that would be an interesting thing for them to hear about too.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Chris. So I'm here to talk about the Climate Finance Accelerator, which I think that would be very attractive for most of you within the room. It is a CFA, as we call it, is a global program that works here in Mexico. Globally, it's implemented by PwC and Ricardo. Here in Mexico, it's implemented by IDOM, who are right here in the room with us. So feel free to reach out to them. And we held the first phase of CFA. The purpose of CFA is bridging or closing the gap between projects and financial institutions. So basically, it's tailoring and workshopping projects so that they are more attractive for the financial institutions and that they are bankable projects. What does this mean? Sometimes, to recall what Andres said within his answer, is sometimes scientists and projects don't speak the same language as the financial institutions. So what we do through IDOM and what we do globally is trying to workshop the pitches to make it more attractive to those financial institutions. Because let me tell you that working in programming, everywhere we go, the biggest question we get is, okay, but where does the money come from? How do I finance these sets of climate actions that we have? And that comes both in private and public sector. So what CFA is aiming to do is close that gap. Say, okay, so you have a project here. It doesn't matter if it's a small project or a startup or something way smaller. You can tailor it and you can workshop it to become bankable. And there are a lot of financial institutions that are willing to put up the money for it. It's just sometimes the projects and what the financial institutions are looking for don't match up. So CFA is here to help with that. We had the first phase in Mexico finish just this year. We had our in-person event with Lord Mayor of City of London at the embassy here in Mexico City. And we were very happy because it was our first in-person event of all of the CFA globally. And we are very proud to say that we are launching the next the call for proposals on the 27th of June. So, I mean, if you want any of this information, I'm available for any of this information. But on LinkedIn, you can find us at Climate Finance Accelerator, where you can find the new call for proposals. We will be hosting policymaker roundtables and market engagement events that maybe we can circulate through all of you through Chris. And Dalus Capital participated in our first phase. So what we learned from just to synthesize what we learned from the first round was that we need to talk to the financial institutions and see, okay, what do you have money for? And then go back to the project proponents. And the project proponents can come from public sector, private sector, and the financing schemes can be of various forms and budgets, and the money can come from everywhere. I don't think that we have enough time to talk about that here, but also the Department of International Trade from the British government has a scheme that's called UK Expert Finance. And if you implement British technology within your project, UKEF can finance a lot of your project. So I think that this is also very attractive, and it shows that there's money. There's money and there's willingness to pay for projects. We just have to bridge the gaps, the language barriers, the technological barriers, the science and project proponent. And I mean, green finance has its own jargon and language on its own. So we need to bridge those barriers and bridge those gaps so that we can effectively have more projects running. So yeah, I mean, I'm here to talk about CFA. You can grab me anytime you want. I'll be here all day, but you can find us on LinkedIn. So thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Anna. Would love to just give a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you all so much.